You know, when we think of a biological alarm going off in the human body, we usually expect it to be, well, loud, like obvious.
Oh, absolutely, like a broken bone or something.
Right, exactly. The X-ray shows that big, jagged white line. The doctor points right to it, and you know exactly what the problem is. You know where it is and how to cast it.
Yeah, it's undeniably localized. It's a very clean binary situation, you know. Broken or not broken. You really don't have to guess if your femur is snapped in half.
Yeah, there is a certain comfort in that clarity, I think. But then you look at something like the human endocrine system, and specifically the thyroid gland, and suddenly that alarm isn't a loud siren at all.
Not even a little bit.
It's more like someone secretly replaced your morning decaf with a triple espresso, and then they slightly tilted all the floors in your house so you constantly feel kind of off balance.
Yeah.
And then to top it off, they convince you that you're just stressed out from work.
That is the absolute definition of a systemic, subtle overdrive. It's
Wow.
murky, it's confusing, and it masquerades as a dozen other entirely different things.
Right. So you're looking at a diagnostic landscape that requires an incredible amount of nuance, mostly because the symptoms are just so diffuse. And that murky territory is exactly where we're heading for today's deep dive. We are unpacking some really fascinating insights from human biologist Gary Brecka, drawing specifically from discussions on the Ultimate Human podcast.
Yeah, there's some incredible material there.
Definitely. And our mission today is to demystify hyperthyroidism. But, we aren't just doing a dry clinical breakdown of a medical condition. We are going to extract some incredibly actionable insights about how our modern environment, our daily stress, and our, microscopic choices directly impact our internal biological pacing.
Which is so relevant whether you've been directly impacted by a thyroid issue or not.
Exactly.
Because the mechanisms we're going to explore here, they apply to human optimization across the board. I mean, the modern world is the massive variable here. Our biology hasn't really changed much in thousands of years, but the environment we are asking that biology to navigate, it's changed exponentially.
So fast.
Right. And the thyroid is right on the front lines of that evolutionary mismatch.
That's the key right there. Because you, the listener, you might be tuning in today to solve a specific health mystery you've been wrestling with. Or, maybe you are just a naturally curious learner who is absolutely fascinated by how the human machine operates.
Either way, you are definitely in the right place.
For sure. Later on, we'll be talking about building what Brecka calls an imaginary fence around your health. And we'll dive into this incredibly catchy idea of snacking on exercise, which I love.
It's a great concept, but let's start with the baseline mechanics of what we are actually dealing with.
Let's do it.
So when we say hyperthyroidism, we are talking about a condition characterized by an overactive thyroid gland. It's this small butterfly-shaped gland at the base of your neck, and it starts producing an excessive, unchecked amount of thyroid hormones, primarily thyroxine and triiodothyronine.
Which are usually just referred to as T4 and T3.
Exactly, T4 and T3.
And these hormones are essentially the ultimate regulators of our metabolic rate. They impact everything. I mean, from your resting heart rate to how quickly your cells burn through calories.
Yeah, they touch basically everything.
So think of your metabolism like a massive symphony orchestra. You have all these different sections. You've got the strings, the brass, the percussion. Those represent your cardiovascular system, your digestive system, your nervous system. And the thyroid is the conductor standing right at the podium.
That's a perfect analogy, because the conductor dictates the tempo, the volume, the overall harmony, and every single cell in your body has thyroid hormone receptors.
Wow. Every single one.
Every single one. So when those hormone levels are appropriate, the music is beautiful. The cells know exactly how much energy to create in their mitochondria. But when the thyroid goes into hyperproduction, it's like every system is being told to hit the gas pedal simultaneously.
So what happens when the conductor abruptly decides to just, double the tempo?
Yep.
The music doesn't stop.
No, it keeps going.
The violins keep playing, the drums keep hitting, but the harmony is entirely disrupted. It becomes frantic, it's chaotic. And the musicians, which are your organs in this case, they start to exhaust themselves trying to keep up with this rogue conductor.
And what's fascinating here is how that cellular exhaustion actually manifests in the physical body. Because the tempo is too fast, the body is quite literally burning through its energetic resources at an unsustainable rate. But it's not a uniform, obvious breakdown.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because how do you distinguish between just having a highly caffeinated, wildly stressful week at work where, maybe your heart is racing a bit and you're feeling kind of on edge, and this internal symphony actually losing control and going completely rogue?
That is the big question.
Because I imagine a massive portion of the population just chalks these symptoms up to the standard grind of modern life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that ambiguity is the single biggest hurdle in endocrinology right now. The line between modern stress and metabolic overdrive is incredibly blurry.
Yeah, I bet.
Let's look at the obvious loud symptoms first. You have spontaneous weight loss without any alterations to your diet or your exercise routine.
Which people probably think is great at first.
Exactly. In our culture, people often initially celebrate that. They think,
Mhm.
oh, wow, I've magically unlocked a metabolic superpower. They don't realize their cells are essentially eating themselves to sustain this false tempo.
That's terrifying.
It is. You also have palpitations. That's where your heart feels like it's fluttering or pounding out of your chest, even while you're just sitting passively on the couch watching TV.
So those are the loud alarms.
Mm-hmm.
You physically notice your heart pounding through your shirt.
Yeah.
But the subtle changes, that's where it gets insidious.
Extremely insidious.
We're talking about increased anxiety, profound difficulty sleeping, and for women, massive shifts in the menstrual cycle.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about how often those subtle signs are misdiagnosed.
I can only imagine.
Right. Someone goes to their doctor and says, look, I'm anxious all the time, my mind is racing, I can't fall asleep, and my cycle is completely irregular. The reflexive assumption in many, quick turnaround clinical settings is going to be psychological.
Right, they just say you're stressed.
Exactly. The doctor might prescribe an anti-anxiety medication or suggest a sleeping pill, or offer birth control to artificially regulate the cycle.
Wow. So they're basically treating the individual instruments in the orchestra, like tuning the violins, muting the drums, completely missing the fact that the conductor is the one causing the actual problem.
They are entirely focused on the downstream effects. But the anxiety of hyperthyroidism isn't necessarily rooted in a psychological trauma or some stressful life event like a bad boss or a terrible breakup.
It's physical.
It is pure physiological anxiety. Your nervous system is being flooded with chemical signals to stay in a state of high alert. Your adrenaline receptors are highly sensitized by the excess thyroid hormone.
So you're feeling the emotion of panic without a reason.
Yes, you are feeling the physical sensation of panic because your metabolic rate is mimicking a literal fight-or-flight response 24 hours a day.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. I mean, you're lying in bed in a dark, quiet room trying to sleep, but your body genuinely thinks it's sprinting away from a predator.
Exactly.
No wonder you can't sleep. Your cells are practically vibrating. And, well, it makes perfect sense why the reproductive system shuts down too. If your body thinks you are in a permanent state of emergency, the absolute last thing it's going to prioritize is reproduction.
Right. It diverts all resources to pure survival.
Wow.
Which is why symptom awareness, and specifically the context of those symptoms, is the critical first step. Documenting these changes is paramount, not just vaguely stating, oh, I feel bad.
Or you need details.
You need to note the specific shifts in energy, the exact nature of the sleep disruptions, and the context of the weight loss. Because frankly, a patient might spend years bouncing from a therapist for the anxiety, to a gynecologist for the menstrual changes, to a cardiologist for the palpitations, before someone finally runs a comprehensive thyroid panel and realizes the conductor is the culprit.
It really highlights how interconnected the human machine is. You just can't isolate these systems. But that brings us to a much larger structural question.
Okay.
The physical symptoms, the racing heart, the anxiety, the weight loss, those are just the alarm bells ringing. To understand why the alarm is ringing, we have to look at what triggers the conductor to speed up the tempo in the first place. What is actively making the thyroid malfunction?
Right. We have to trace it back to the source code of the dysfunction, and there are several key contributors here.
Okay, what are the big ones?
The most prominent are autoimmune diseases, specifically Graves' disease. You also have structural issues like thyroid nodules, which are essentially small rogue growths on the gland that independently produce their own thyroid hormone, completely ignoring the brain's regulatory signals.
Like a little rogue factory.
Exactly. And then you have thyroiditis, which is an inflammation of the thyroid where the body's own antibodies might actually be attacking the gland itself.
Let's focus on that autoimmune aspect for a second, because it is just a profound biological irony. In conditions like Graves' disease, your body's own defense mechanism, your immune system, which, evolved over millions of years to protect you from foreign invaders like viruses and bacteria, Somehow it gets fundamentally confused.
It misidentifies the thyroid gland as a mortal threat.
Right. It's essentially friendly fire on a microscopic level.
That's exactly what it is. The immune system produces specific antibodies known as thyroid-stimulating immunoglobulins, or TSIs. Now, in a healthy body, your pituitary gland in the brain releases a hormone called TSH to tell the thyroid how much hormone to make. It's a very tight, controlled feedback loop.
Okay, so the brain is normally in charge.
Right. But in Graves' disease, these rogue TSI antibodies are structurally similar enough to TSH that they bind directly to the receptors on the thyroid gland.
Oh, man. It's as if a hacker has bypassed the body's regulatory systems, broken into the control room, and just locked the accelerator pedal to the floor.
Yes.
The brain is screaming to stop production,
Right.
but the thyroid can't hear the brain anymore. It only hears these rogue antibodies commanding it to work harder and harder.
And the tragic irony is that the body is systematically destroying its own energy regulator in a misguided, hypervigilant attempt to protect itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We know that genetics play a significant role here, right?
Absolutely.
So, if autoimmune conditions often have a genetic component, are some people just walking around with a ticking time bomb in their neck? I mean, do we actually have a say in whether this condition activates, or is it purely just the luck of the genetic draw?
That strikes right at the heart of modern epigenetic theory. Genetics absolutely play a role, but environmental factors and lifestyle choices dictate the expression of those genetics.
Okay, so the genes aren't a guarantee.
Exactly. And this is a crucial distinction that completely changes how we view inherited disease. Your genetics provide the blueprint. They might say, hey, this individual has a specific sequence of DNA that makes them highly susceptible to an autoimmune thyroid response. But the environment acts as the construction crew.
Oh, I like that. The blueprint doesn't build the house by itself. You need the crew to actually lay the bricks.
Precisely. You might have the genetic markers for Graves' disease, but if you never encountered the specific environmental triggers, the severe physiological stressors, or the toxic loads that initiate that initial immune confusion, well, the genetic potential might never be realized. It could stay entirely dormant your entire life.
So having a family history of thyroid issues isn't a guaranteed fate. It's not a death sentence.
Not at all.
The source material strongly recommends genetic counseling if you have this family history. And based on what you're saying, we shouldn't view genetic counseling as looking into a grim crystal ball to see what diseases we are doomed to get.
Far from it. It is proactive mapping. If you look at a topographical map and you see that there's a steep cliff ahead on your current path, you don't just close your eyes and drive off it, right?
Okay, you change your route.
Exactly. Genetic counseling provides incredibly valuable insights into your specific, personalized vulnerabilities. If you know you are genetically predisposed to hyperthyroidism, you can be hypervigilant about the environmental factors that we know can pull the trigger on that loaded genetic gun.
Which is an incredibly empowering shift in perspective, really. It moves the narrative from, I am a helpless victim of my DNA to I am the active manager of my genetic expression.
Exactly. It gives you the control back.
And if genetics are just the dormant blueprint and the environment is the active construction crew, we really need to pivot and talk about that external world. Because the daily choices we make, the things we touch, breathe, and eat, they are actively communicating with our internal state.
Yes, we have to move our focus from the internal mechanisms we inherited to the external environment we inhabit, because that external environment is where we actually have all the leverage.
Absolutely. And this brings us to one of the most compelling concepts Gary Brecka discusses, the idea of defending the temple.
Right.
He strongly advocates for conducting an environmental health check right in your own home and workplace. We are specifically looking for endocrine disruptors. We're talking about chemicals and household cleaning products, personal care items like shampoos and cosmetics, laundry and dishwasher detergents, processed foods, and the massive one-plastic containers for food storage and water bottles.
It's a deeply daunting list because those are the very items that make up the invisible fabric of modern convenience.
It really is. You wake up, you wash your hair with a chemical-laden shampoo, you wipe down your kitchen counter with a synthetic chemical spray, you pack your lunch in a plastic Tupperware container, and you drink out of a soft plastic water bottle all day. It's completely normalized.
We don't even see it anymore.
We really don't. But Brecka introduces this analogy that frames it perfectly, the imaginary fence.
Let's explore the mechanics of that fence.
The core idea is that the human body is a temple. and we must build an imaginary fence to filter things before they make it to the temple doors, rather than letting the temple itself bear the burden of being the filter.
Which raises an important question. What actually happens biologically when we force the temple to act as the filter?
Right. What's the damage?
When we talk about endocrine disruptors, things like BPA, phthalates, parabens, we aren't just talking about generic toxins that, make you feel sluggish. We are talking about highly specific synthetic chemicals that were engineered for industrial purposes,
Yeah.
like making plastics flexible or making lotions shelf-stable.
Okay.
But purely by accident, these chemicals are structurally and molecularly similar enough to our own hormones that they can actually fit right into our cellular hormone receptors.
Oh, wow. So it's like a thief using a bump key. It's not the real key, but it's close enough in shape to slide into the lock and turn the deadbolt.
That's exactly it. Your cellular locks simply don't know the difference. So a chemical from a plastic water bottle, let's say a phthalate, enters your bloodstream after you drink water that's been sitting in a warm car. That chemical floats around, bumps into a thyroid hormone receptor or an estrogen receptor, and slides right in.
And then what happens?
Once it's in the lock, it does one of two things. It either blocks the real hormone from doing its job, acting like a broken key jammed in a lock, or it artificially stimulates the receptor, sending a false, chaotic message to the cell to alter its function.
That is wild. So while your brain is trying to tightly regulate your metabolism, your cells are receiving these chaotic, synthetic, alien signals constantly.
And your primary filtration organs, the liver and the kidneys, they have to work relentless overtime to identify, break down, and excrete these foreign synthetic substances. But if you are constantly slathering on toxic lotions, breathing in aerosolized chemical air fresheners, and drinking microplastics, those filters become completely overwhelmed.
I just can't keep up.
The body simply can't clear the backlog, and that is the core concept of toxic load.
So it's not that using a chemical glass cleaner once is going to instantly give you a hyperactive thyroid. It's the cumulative effect. It's the daily drip, drip, drip of exposure over years that slowly fills up the biological bucket until it finally overflows. The immune system gets overwhelmed, loses its targeting capability, and snaps into that autoimmune-friendly fire mode.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains why swapping to organic produce or natural, clean beauty products isn't just some trendy, expensive lifestyle choice for internet influencers.
Right, it's not just an aesthetic.
It is a critical biological defense strategy. When you swap out a heavily fragranced, toxic dishwasher detergent for a clean, plant-based one, you aren't just protecting the environment, you are actively removing a daily chemical stressor from your own endocrine system. You're taking a heavy brick out of the backpack your immune system is forced to carry around every single day.
That reframes it so powerfully. I think a lot of people feel immense decision fatigue and apathy about this stuff.
Oh, for sure.
They read the news and think, well, everything causes cancer, everything is toxic, the air is polluted. I might as well just give up and drink from the plastic bottle because I can't control it.
It's overwhelming.
But the imaginary fence concept changes that dynamic.
Right.
You don't have to control the whole world. You just have to control what deliberately crosses the boundary into your personal temple.
Because it's entirely about risk mitigation. You can't live in a sterile bubble, but you can dramatically lower the baseline stress on your system.
Right.
And remember, some people are vastly more sensitive to these disruptors than they realize. That's the genetic vulnerability we discussed earlier coming into play. If you have that blueprint for an autoimmune response, your personal toxic load threshold might be much, much lower than your neighbor's.
So what's fine for them is dangerous for you.
Exactly. What is a completely harmless, unnoticeable exposure for them might be the exact tipping point that sends your thyroid into overdrive.
Which is why the emphasis on avoiding plastic containers for food storage and water is so crucial. Think about the history of something like BPA or phthalates. We engineered them purely for convenience, to make shatterproof bottles and flexible packaging.
Yeah, it was all about manufacturing ease.
But the sheer convenience of tossing a plastic water bottle into your bag is fundamentally at odds with the delicate, microscopic balance of our endocrine system. We are literally prioritizing not having to wash a reusable glass bottle over the integrity of our metabolic conductor.
It's a wild trade-off when you step back and look at it objectively.
It really is.
It is a profound mismatch between modern industrial manufacturing and ancient human biology. And building that imaginary fence reading labels, filtering your water, switching to glass or stainless steel, is the mandatory first step in taking back sovereignty over your physiological environment.
Okay, so we've established the threat. We understand the symphony, we know what triggers the immune chaos, and we're starting to proactively build our fence to stop new toxins from entering the temple. But what if the alarm is already ringing?
What do you mean?
Like, what if the tempo is already out of control and you're feeling the anxiety, the palpitations, the weight loss? We have to move from environmental defense to becoming our own biological detectives.
Yes. This is where we move from preventative theory into actionable practice. General symptom awareness is a good starting point, but granular symptom charting is where the real diagnostic power lies.
Because there are very specific, actionable steps to take here. Tracking your resting heart rate is the baseline. Tracking your heart rate variability, or HRV, takes it a step further. And maintaining a comprehensive symptom journal is crucial.
Highly crucial.
But not just lazily jotting down, felt anxious today. We are talking about logging the severity on a scale of 1 to 10, the frequency, any temporal patterns, and crucially, the triggers. Like, what did you eat right before the palpitations started? Did it happen after a specific stressful event?
Let's unpack the wearable metrics first, because they provide objective data in a sea of subjective feelings. Resting heart rate is fairly straightforward. If your thyroid is in overdrive, your basal metabolic rate is elevated, meaning your baseline heart rate will climb even when you are doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
But heart rate variability, HRV, is a much more nuanced and powerful window directly into the autonomic nervous system.
I really want to dive deeply into HRV because I think a lot of people hear heart rate and assume HRV is just your pulse, or they think a highly regular heartbeat, like a ticking clock, is a good thing.
It's actually highly counterintuitive. HRV measures the specific variation in time measured in milliseconds between each consecutive heartbeat. You actually do not want your heart to beat like a perfect, rigid metric.
All right.
Really. High variability is a sign of robust health. It indicates that your autonomic nervous system is flexible, resilient, and can fluidly switch back and forth between the sympathetic fight-or-flight gas pedal and the parasympathetic rest and digest brake pedal.
Okay, so if you are breathing in slowly, your heart rate dips slightly. And when you breathe out, it speeds up slightly. And that variation means your body is highly responsive to its immediate environment.
Exactly.
It can handle a stressor, deal with it, and then instantly apply the brakes to recover.
Precisely. But if you have hyperthyroidism, your body is effectively locked in that sympathetic high-stress state. The rogue conductor is demanding maximum effort relentlessly.
Right, the pedal is glued to the floor.
So the vagus nerve, which acts as the primary brake pedal for your heart and your stress response, is essentially overridden. As a result, your HRV will plummet. Your heart starts beating very rigidly with almost no variation between beats because it's constantly anticipating danger or extreme physical exertion.
It's basically bracing for impact.
Yes, bracing for impact. So if you are tracking your metrics and you see a consistently low HRV alongside a steadily climbing resting heart rate, you have concrete, measurable data that something deeply metabolic is off. It's no longer just, I feel stressed.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, when you actually take this data, print it out, and walk into a doctor's office? Because, we've all been in that frustrating scenario. You wait months for an appointment, you get maybe 15 minutes with a specialist, you try to articulate that you just feel off or wired, and you often leave feeling unheard. Or worse, handed a prescription for a basic anti-anxiety med.
That is the exact systemic failure we are trying to circumvent here. A healthcare practitioner, no matter how skilled they are, is operating at a massive deficit when a patient can only provide vague emotional descriptions.
That makes sense.
Think about the profound power dynamic shift here. When you walk into an endocrinologist's office, which is the specialized route you need to take for this, and you just say, I feel anxious and I'm losing weight, you are a passive participant. You're just hoping the doctor is a good enough guesser to arrive at the right diagnosis within a 15-minute window.
Right. You are a blank puzzle they have to solve from scratch, and they might just reach for the most statistically common piece, which is psychological stress.
But imagine a different scenario. You walk in, sit down, and say, Doctor, over the last 6 weeks, my average resting heart rate has climbed from 60 to 82 beats per minute. My HRV has simultaneously dropped by 35%. I experience severe palpitations, specifically within 30 minutes of eating processed carbohydrates, and my sleep journal shows I wake up with a racing heart primarily between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Wow. That's incredibly specific.
In that moment, you are no longer a passive patient. You are an empowered, peer-level collaborator. You are handing them the exact diagnostic keys they need to unlock the puzzle.
It forces the practitioner to look at the data, not just the subjective emotion. And this leads perfectly into the next phase, seeking an integrative medicine consultation.
Yes, integrative medicine is key here.
Because a traditional model of medicine often forces a binary choice. But integrative medicine explicitly combines conventional allopathic medical treatments with complementary holistic therapies.
And this reflects a massive necessary evolution in how we approach chronic disease. Historically, there was a rigid, almost hostile divide. You had allopathic conventional medicine on one side, which, by the way, is absolutely unparalleled at acute care, complex surgeries, and deploying powerful pharmaceuticals to stabilize crises.
Right. If you're in a car crash, you want conventional medicine.
Exactly. But then on the other side, you had complementary or alternative medicine, which focused heavily on lifestyle, nutritional biochemistry, and holistic mind-body balance.
And for decades, those two camps rarely talked to each other and often actively dismissed each other.
Exactly. But integrative medicine recognizes that you need both toolkits to truly heal. For a severe case of hyperthyroidism, the conventional approach is often non-negotiable.
You need the big guns sometimes.
You do. There are cutting-edge medications, like methimazole, that specifically target the thyroid to block the overproduction of hormones. In extreme cases, there are innovative surgical techniques to remove part of the gland, or radioactive iodine therapies to shrink it. If your thyroid is producing life-threatening levels of hormone that could trigger a thyroid storm, a dangerous spike in heart rate and blood pressure, you absolutely need that conventional medication to block the production immediately.
You need the fire department to come and put out the raging fire.
Right.
But, and I think this is the crucial part, putting out the fire with high-pressure hoses doesn't rebuild the house. You're just left with a burnt, soggy structure.
Exactly. The medication forcefully suppresses the symptom, which saves your life, but it doesn't do a single thing to address the root cause of why the immune system went rogue and started the fire in the first place.
Which is where the holistic side comes in.
That's where the integrative approach shines. An integrative practitioner will use the conventional medication to stabilize the vital signs, but simultaneously deploy complementary therapies to repair the gut lining, identify and reduce the specific environmental toxic load, and modulate the immune system through nutrition.
So the ultimate goal is that eventually, once the root cause is addressed, you might be able to taper off the heavy medications.
Exactly. That's the hope.
Now, there's a strong caution in the source material against just banging around on the internet for information when it comes to this. The goal is a personalized, targeted approach guided by an expert. Because, let's face it, if you Google cure hyperthyroidism, you are going to be bombarded with 50 different miracle supplements and 100 conflicting diet plans.
And because of the genetic individuality we discussed earlier, the quote-unquote miracle cure protocol that worked perfectly for some wellness influencer online might contain compounds that actively exacerbate the condition in your specific body.
Right. You need a guide who actually understands both the hard biochemistry and your unique physiological data.
You can't just guess.
So, armed with a proper diagnosis, objective data, and an integrative practitioner, we move into the actual daily battlefield of healing. It's a lifestyle transformation that extends far beyond swallowing a pill. And this brings us to what I like to call the holistic arsenal, reshaping the precise nutrition we put into our bodies and actively managing the mind-body connection.
This is where we start fundamentally changing the internal environment of the temple we fenced off earlier.
Let's start with the physical fuel we put into the temple. Nutrition. The overarching goal is an anti-inflammatory diet, but it gets highly specific. There are three main nutritional deficiencies that aggressively exacerbate hyperthyroid conditions: selenium, zinc, and omega-3 fatty acids.
What's fascinating here is that we often view vitamins and minerals as just generic, healthy things you should consume to feel energetic. But in the context of thyroid disease, these aren't just generic wellness boosters.
They have actual jobs.
They have highly specific mechanical rules in hormone synthesis and immune regulation. Let's look at why an anti-inflammatory diet is the non-negotiable baseline. We discussed earlier that conditions like thyroiditis literally involve physical inflammation of the gland itself.
Right.
If your daily diet consists of highly processed foods, industrial seed oils, or massive amounts of refined sugar, you are driving systemic low-grade inflammation throughout your entire bloodstream.
You were basically backing up a truck and throwing gasoline directly onto a fire that is already burning out of control in your neck.
Exactly. The body is trying to heal an inflamed organ, and you are feeding it highly inflammatory fuel. So an anti-inflammatory diet removes those chemical accelerants,
Right.
but then you have to actively provide the specific raw materials required for cellular repair.
And that's where selenium comes in, right?
That's where selenium becomes the absolute star of the show.
Okay, let's unpack the selenium piece. Because the chemistry here is just mind-blowing. The thyroid makes its hormones by combining iodine and an amino acid called tyrosine, but that chemical reaction creates a dangerous byproduct, hydrogen peroxide.
Yes.
Wait, hydrogen peroxide?
Yeah.
Like the stuff in the little brown bottle you put on cuts?
The exact same potent chemical.
Mm-hmm.
Hydrogen peroxide is naturally generated inside your thyroid gland during the manufacturing of thyroid hormone. It is a highly volatile oxidative molecule.
That seems dangerous.
In a healthy thyroid, it isn't a problem because the body produces an enzyme called glutathione peroxidase, which instantly neutralizes the hydrogen peroxide, turning it safely into water.
Okay, that's a neat trick. But here's the catch, right? The body absolutely cannot create that neutralizing enzyme without selenium.
Right.
So if you are deficient in selenium and your thyroid is in hyperdrive making massive amounts of hormone, it is also generating massive amounts of hydrogen peroxide that it just can't neutralize.
Exactly. The thyroid is quite literally bleaching and burning itself from the inside out due to oxidative stress.
It is a remarkable biological mechanism. I mean, providing adequate selenium through Brazil nuts, specific seafood, or targeted supplementation literally equips the thyroid with the biochemical fire extinguisher it needs to survive its own metabolic processes.
It's incredibly specific.
It's just wild. It's not a wellness tip. It's a critical chemical equation.
Yeah.
And what about zinc and omega-3s?
Well, zinc is heavily involved in the proper functioning of the thymus gland and the maturation of white blood cells, meaning it directly regulates the immune system, helping to prevent the kind of friendly fire autoimmune responses we see in Graves' disease.
Oh, I see.
And omega-3 fatty acids are fundamental for cellular membrane fluidity. They literally incorporate into the walls of your cells, replacing stiffer inflammatory fats, and actively interrupt the inflammatory pathways at a cellular level.
So without these three specific nutrients, the body simply doesn't have the biochemical wrenches and hammers needed to repair the broken engine. It makes so much sense. You can't fix a complex machine if you don't have the right tools.
Yeah.
But the lifestyle transformation doesn't stop at physical nutrition. It dives deep into the mind-body connection, which, is often the hardest pill for highly analytical people to swallow.
Oh, absolutely.
We were talking about mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, Tai Chi, Qigong, Pilates, yoga, meditation, and morning breathwork.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right. Because I think for a lot of people, there's a massive cognitive disconnect here. How on earth does sitting still on a cushion, meditating, or moving very slowly in a park doing Tai Chi physically alter an overactive, diseased thyroid gland?
It sounds unbelievable to some.
To someone looking for a hard science fix, a biological intervention, it can sound incredibly woo-woo. It sounds like telling someone with a broken leg to just, think positively.
That is exactly the pushback many logically minded people have. But the mechanism of action for these practices is not magic. It is entirely grounded in neuroendocrinology. It all comes back to violently balancing the body's stress response.
Okay, let's connect those dots.
Remember the autonomic nervous system we discussed with HRV? The tug of war between the sympathetic fight or flight and the parasympathetic rest and digest.
Yes, the hyperactive thyroid locks the gas pedal down, trapping us in fight or flight.
Right. But your endocrine system and your nervous system are not isolated silos. They are in constant bidirectional communication via the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Right, the brain-body connection.
When you are mentally stressed, even just ruminating about a work deadline, agonizing over your health, or reading stressful news on your phone, your brain perceives a threat. It doesn't know the difference between a looming deadline and a looming predator. It immediately signals the release of cortisol and adrenaline.
And in a person with an autoimmune thyroid condition, this chronic, low-grade flood of stress hormones acts as a massive biological trigger for further immune dysregulation and physical inflammation.
Yes. So your abstract anxious thoughts are literally creating physical, tangible inflammation in your bloodstream.
Which is just crazy.
It raises an important question regarding how our modern emotional state dictates our physical metabolic state. The mind-body practices we are talking about, Tai Chi, Qigong, morning breathwork. These are not just pleasant ways to feel a little more relaxed.
What are they then?
They are targeted mechanical interventions designed to force the nervous system out of sympathetic dominance.
Explain the mechanics of that. Like, how does slow movement actually change the nervous system?
Let's look at Tai Chi or specific breath work. When you engage in slow, deliberate diaphragmatic breathing, the physical expansion of your diaphragm mechanically stimulates the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve, which we talked about earlier, is the brake pedal.
Exactly. The vagus nerve is the main informational highway connecting your gut, your heart, and your brain. When stimulated by deep breathing, the vagus nerve releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine directly onto the heart, which instantly slows the heart rate.
Oh, wow.
It simultaneously sends a powerful signal up to the brain that says, hey, the breathing is slow and controlled. We must be safe. There is no tiger chasing us.
It's a physiological hack. You are using the body to trick the brain into calming down, rather than trying to use the anxious brain to calm the anxious brain, which never works anyway.
Precisely. It is manually pulling the emergency brake on a runaway train. The brain receives the vagal signal, dials back the production of cortisol and adrenaline, which in turn radically reduces the inflammatory signal sent to the immune system. The immune system calms down, and the aggressive pressure on the thyroid gland is finally relieved.
That reframes things completely. When you look at it through the lens of neuroendocrinology, cognitive behavioral therapy isn't just for mental health in this context. CBT is a literal metabolic intervention.
Absolutely.
If you can use therapy to change your thought patterns, stop catastrophizing, and reduce your baseline anxiety, you are quite literally changing the chemical soup that your thyroid bathes in every single day.
It is the ultimate scientific realization that the mind and the body are not separate, distinct entities. They are a single, continuous, highly reactive feedback loop.
And the most beautiful part of this lifestyle transformation is that it is something completely within our control. I mean, we can't always control our genetics, and we might need a doctor for the medication, but we can completely control what we put on our dinner plate.
Yes, we can.
We can actively choose to take 10 minutes for morning breath work before looking at our emails. It shifts the power dynamic entirely back to the individual.
Nutrition and mindfulness set the vital baseline. They provide the calm environment and the raw cellular materials. But to truly generate lasting vitality and flush the system, there is an active physical component required.
And that leads us to the final major piece of this protocol.
Hmm.
We've talked about defending the temple from toxins, fueling the temple with the right nutrients, and calming the temple through the vagus nerve. Now we need to talk about moving the temple.
Moving the temple, yes.
There is a massive initiative discussed by Gary Brecka, the 10,000-step challenge. And the sheer scale of this is just incredible. He talks about getting 50,000 plus people involved simultaneously.
It's huge.
There is a history of these massive communal events, like a 50,000-person water fast, a huge breathwork challenge. And now the focus is strictly on accumulating steps, specifically occurring on the 26th, 27th, and 28th of the month.
The massive scale is important for community engagement, but the biological methodology behind how the steps are accumulated is what's truly fascinating.
Right. The tracking is highly encouraged, using a Whoop strap, an Oura ring, or even just the built-in pedometer on your iPhone to gamify the process. But the concept that completely jumped out at me was this specific phrase: snacking on exercise.
That's a great term.
I absolutely love that framing. Snacking on exercise.
Let's deconstruct why that specific phrasing is so effective, both biologically and psychologically, especially for someone dealing with metabolic or autoimmune issues.
Because it's different from a regular workout.
Completely different. When the average person hears they need to exercise for their health, they instantly picture a grueling, unbroken, 1-hour, high-intensity interval training session. They picture sweating profusely in a gym, lifting heavy weights, or sprinting on a treadmill until they are gasping for air.
Which, if you have an overactive thyroid, your heart is already racing at 90 beats per minute while you're just sitting still.
Right.
And your cells are exhausted from the excessive tempo. So a high-intensity workout sounds like a terrible, almost dangerous idea.
It can be highly counterproductive. A massive, acute bout of intense exercise causes a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline. It is a severe, acute biological stressor.
But wait, I thought exercise stress was good, like hormetic stress.
For a healthy person, yes. That acute hormetic stress forces adaptation. It makes them stronger and more resilient. But for someone whose system is already stuck in chronic overdrive, whose immune system is actively attacking their thyroid, that intense gym session is perceived by the body as another massive threat. You might just be throwing more wood onto the internal fire.
But the human body still fundamentally requires movement to function, right? I mean, we can't just lie perfectly still on a couch to heal. The lymphatic system doesn't even have a pump. It relies entirely on muscular contraction to move fluid.
Exactly. Movement creates life. It creates oxygenation of the tissues. It creates vital circulation. Without circulation, the selenium and omega-3s you just ate can't actually reach the damaged cells.
Oh, that's true.
And the metabolic waste and toxins processed by the liver can't be efficiently cleared away either. This is where the brilliance of snacking on exercise becomes the perfect paradigm.
So breaking it up into manageable bite-sized chunks, you aren't forcing yourself to do 10,000 steps all at once on a forced march.
Not at all.
You are taking a gentle 10-minute walk around the block after breakfast. You are pacing around your office or your living room while you're on a 15-minute phone call. You deliberately park at the back of the grocery store lot. You take the stairs instead of the elevator for 2 flights.
Yes, you are providing the body with continuous, gentle, low-grade movement spread throughout the entire day. This creates a steady, rhythmic flow of oxygen and circulation. The heart rate elevates slightly, but it never triggers that massive, panic-inducing stress hormone cascade of a severe workout.
It manages the metabolic rate gently.
Very gently. It keeps the internal engine perfectly lubricated and the fluids moving without ever revving the RPMs into the red zone.
It's the difference between tending a warm, slow-burning ember in a fireplace versus pouring lighter fluid on a bonfire.
That's a great way to put it.
And from a purely psychological standpoint, snacking is just so much more approachable. If you're exhausted from hyperthyroidism, finding the motivation and energy for 60 continuous minutes of exercise can feel literally impossible.
It feels like a mountain.
It becomes a source of guilt and shame. But finding 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, anyone can do that. It completely removes the psychological barrier to entry.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's also worth reflecting on how gamifying health leverages innate human psychology to drive biological change.
Like using the rings and trackers.
Right. Using tracking devices like Aura Rings or Apple Watches and joining a massive community of 50,000 people doing it concurrently taps into something deep within our neurobiology.
Because we are tribal social creatures.
Yeah.
We want to belong to a movement.
Exactly. And our dopamine systems are wired to seek out measurable progress. By putting a hard, achievable number on it, 10,000 steps, and tracking it visually on a device, you are providing immediate positive neurological feedback to the brain.
You are turning the hard, often lonely work of biological homeostasis into a communal game.
Yes. Chronic illness, especially one as invisible and confusing as hyperthyroidism, can be incredibly isolating, but engaging in this challenge reduces that isolation. You are no longer alone in your house trying to figure out why your heart is racing. You are part of a 50,000-person collective actively creating life, circulation, and healing.
And there's a direct connection back to mental clarity and emotional state, too.
Yeah.
If you are consistently moving, taking deep breaths during these micro-walks, and clearing out the stagnant energy and metabolic waste, your mental state is naturally going to elevate.
Everything is connected.
The anxiety drops, the brain fog lifts. It's a beautiful, holistic, self-reinforcing loop.
It really is the ultimate integrative therapy. It addresses the physical need for circulation, the psychological need for manageable goals, and the communal need for support all at once.
Looking back at the massive amount of ground we've covered today, the journey we've mapped out is profound. We started by recognizing the rogue symphony of hyperthyroidism, understanding that the subtle, confusing symptoms, the unexplained anxiety, the debilitating sleep issues are just the alarm bells of a metabolic tempo gone completely wild.
We identified the specific triggers beneath the alarm, particularly the autoimmune confusion, where the body's defense system is tricked into attacking its own energy regulators.
And we clarified the empowering reality that your genetics are merely the blueprint. Your environment and your lifestyle pull the trigger.
Which means you have control.
Right. And we laid out an actionable plan to take control of that environment. We talked about building that imaginary fence, auditing the temple for hidden endocrine disruptors in our plastics and cosmetics, swapping out toxic household products.
Aggressively mitigating our daily toxic load so our liver and kidneys can actually keep up.
We learned how to step into the role of biological detective, tracking our HRV and keeping granular symptom journals to empower ourselves from a passive patient into a collaborative partner when we sit down for an integrative medicine consultation.
And we established the parameters of the holistic arsenal, actively using targeted nutrients like selenium and zinc to biochemically cool the oxidative inflammation.
And utilizing mind-body practices like breathwork and Tai Chi to manually stimulate the vagus nerve and forcefully shift the nervous system out of chronic fight or flight.
And finally, we learn to snack on exercise, leveraging community and gentle, continuous movement to create life and circulation without overwhelming an already stressed system.
Embracing this journey is not just about fighting a battle with the disease. It's an opportunity for profound personal growth and wellness. Facing a complex health crisis forces you to intimately understand the miraculous mechanics of your own biology. It forces you to optimize how you live.
It takes a biological breakdown and uses it as the fuel for a total lifestyle breakthrough.
I love that framing. So as we wrap up today's incredibly deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
We've talked extensively about the thyroid as a master regulator. But if our thyroid acts as the ultimate hypersensitive sensor to our environment, if it is delicate enough to react to microscopic synthetic toxins in our daily shampoo, to the unspoken chronic anxieties we carry home from our jobs, and to the unnatural sedentary nature of sitting under fluorescent lights all day, perhaps an overactive thyroid isn't just a biological glitch or a random failure.
That's a fascinating perspective to consider.
What if it is actually the body's most desperate, dramatic, and ultimately protective alarm bell? A blaring evolutionary signal attempting to tell us that our modern plastic-wrapped, high-stress, physically disconnected lifestyle is fundamentally biologically incompatible with our ancient hardwired machinery. It makes you wonder, what other quiet internal alarms is your body trying to ring right now? And more importantly, knowing what you know now, are you willing to do the work to build a fence before the alarm finally goes off?